One phone call. Just one. And immediately, a $70 million jet carrying hundreds of passengers was held firmly on the ground like a wounded iron bird. Not because of a bomb, not because of engine failure, but simply from the cold decision in the voice of a black woman who seemed at first glance unremarkable. Beyond the massive glass walls of the Polaris Lounge at San Francisco Airport, night fell like a velvet curtain, the lights from rows of planes casting trembling golden streaks across the wet tarmac. Inside, the air was cool with conditioned silence, business travelers whispering over deals, silver spoons tapping porcelain cups, the scent of Arabica coffee mingling with the leather of luxury chairs. In a quiet corner where the light softened, sat a woman no one turned to notice. She looked like any other passenger, a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, low-heeled polished shoes, a thin silk scarf draped around her neck. Her face was calm, her eyes deep and steady, her coiled hair tied neatly back. No phone, no magazine, no laptop screen glowing. Only a small silver medical transport case placed carefully on the seat beside her. Her name was Dr. Naomi Carter, 45 years old, one of the world's leading cardiothoracic surgeons. These were the hands that had once held the fragile hearts of infants no heavier than a teacup, bringing them back from the brink of death. Those same hands now rested quietly on her lap, but one glance at them was enough to sense the pulse of an entire world coursing through them. Inside the silver case, preserved in a chilled solution, was a lab-grown artificial heart. Not for research, not for display, but for a living patient. Ethan Sterling, 17 years old, the only son of billionaire Robert Sterling. Ethan lay in intensive care at Johns Hopkins, halfway across the country, counting down the final beats of a failing, malformed heart. His window for survival had shrunk to less than 12 hours, and that small case was the line between a funeral and a miracle. Naomi knew every detail of this symphony of fate. Each passing minute was a note, each glance at her watch another heartbeat. She had learned to live with pressure, but tonight, as the boarding chime rang out, a quiet storm rose within her. Everything depended on precision, and a single disruption could shatter it all. She rose. Her stride was composed, the wheels of her case gliding smoothly over the floor, her free hand gripping the medical carrier. At the boarding gate, the agent scanned her ticket, recognized the name and seat number. 2A, first class. "Have a pleasant flight, Dr. Carter," the young woman said warmly. Naomi inclined her head with a faint smile and stepped into the jet bridge. But the first person to meet her was not the cheerful flight attendant she expected. Standing at the entrance was Linda Walker, 50 years old, the purser with 20. 2 years of experience, posture rigid, her practiced smile faltering halfway when her eyes landed on Naomi. It lasted only a second, but in that instant a flicker of doubt passed through her gaze before it cooled into distance. "Welcome aboard," Linda said, polite yet faintly chilled. Naomi nodded and turned left toward first class, but suddenly Linda shifted slightly, blocking her way. "Sorry, may I see your boarding pass again?" The words were ordinary, but the tone was not. It carried the unspoken question. Are you sure? Do people like you belong here? Naomi handed over her ticket. Linda studied the seat number, 2A. Far too long. Her lips pressed into a hard line, as if the seat had been meant for someone else. Finally, she returned it, her voice still strained. This way, please. Naomi said nothing. She walked past calmly, set the silver case beneath the seat in front of her, eyes fixed on the steady blue light of the temperature gauge. Everything was safe. Yet a small crack had just appeared in the perfect score of tonight's symphony. A crack born of bias, seemingly harmless. But to Naomi it sounded like the trumpet call before a storm. In first class, a few passengers had noticed. They had heard Linda's tone. They looked at Naomi with curiosity mixed with suspicion. A seasoned attorney, Arthur Miles, 50,5, lowered his newspaper, a sharp gleam of caution in his eyes. He sensed something was wrong. Naomi's face remained still. She let no anger escape, because she knew true power did not lie in loud reaction. It lay in silence, in the ability to wait for the precise moment to turn the game. And she knew. That moment was coming. The first-class cabin of the Boeing 777 was as still as an oasis. Soft amber light washed over brushed aluminum dividers, leather seats reclined into beds, glasses of wine shimmered with a golden glow. Everything was designed to suggest calm, luxury, and privilege. Naomi Carter placed the silver case at her feet, checked the small display flashing 4 degrees Celsius, stable, safe. She drew a long breath, leaned back, and allowed herself to close her eyes for a moment. In her mind, the sutures, vessels, and heartbeats of Ethan Sterling mapped themselves out like an intricate blueprint. The artificial heart inside that case was the final key. But within minutes, the fragile quiet was broken. A shadow fell across her. Naomi opened her eyes. Linda Walker stood beside her, name tag catching the dim light. Her smile was stiff, her eyes sharp with scrutiny. "Madam," Linda's voice was low but cutting, "I need you to change seats." Naomi frowned slightly. "Excuse me?" Linda avoided her gaze, glancing down at the passenger manifest in her hand as if to flaunt authority. Seat 2A was reserved for a special passenger. There must have been a mistake at the gate. Naomi exhaled slowly, answered with calm clarity. "I am Dr. Naomi Carter. This is my assigned seat." A flicker of hesitation crossed Linda's face, quickly replaced with a tight, dismissive smile. "Then I'll need to see your identification. We must confirm." It was an absurd request. Documents had been checked at security, scanned at the gate. Never had a flight attendant demanded ID again on board. Naomi knew this was not procedure. It was a challenge. She opened her wallet and handed over her driver's license. The lamplight glinted off the words, "Naomi Carter, MD." Linda looked at it, her lips tightening. Then came a remark, cold as a scalpel. "My list specifies this seat for a VIP surgeon, a cardiothoracic specialist. It seems," Linda paused, her eyes sliding from Naomi's neatly coiled hair to her understated suit, "there's been a mistake." The words were not loud, yet sharp enough to make a few passengers freeze. In seat 3C, attorney Arthur Miles, 50,5, lowered his newspaper, his gaze locked on the scene with steely focus. He understood. This was no different than saying outright that a black woman could not possibly be the surgeon the airline expected. Naomi lifted her head, her voice low and even, like the edge of a scalpel. "I am that surgeon, and this is my seat. Is there a problem?" The air thickened. Linda hesitated, then braced herself, raising her voice a notch. "The problem is that economy passengers are not permitted to seat themselves in first class. I will give you one final chance to return to your proper place before I call the captain." The cabin froze. Some passengers frowned. A few phones rose discreetly, recording. Naomi's throat burned dry, but her eyes remained calm. That calm was sharper, more dangerous than anger. Arthur Miles folded his paper, his voice cutting through the tension like a gavel in a courtroom. "Enough. I saw her board. This is her seat. You are harassing a lawful passenger." Linda spun toward him, eyes flashing. "This is an internal matter, sir. Please do not interfere." Naomi looked from the lawyer's face, firm with indignation, to the flicker of triumph curling at Linda's lips. In that instant, she understood. This storm was not just aimed at her. It threatened Ethan Sterling as well. That heart could not wait forever. Naomi closed her eyes for a second. When they opened, they burned brighter than fire. "This seat," she said, voice steady, each word striking like a hammer, "is mine, and I will not move." A few passengers held their breath. Arthur Miles gave a subtle nod, as if choosing sides. Linda, furious, spun away and lunged for the phone to the cockpit. The first-class door remained shut. But Naomi knew. The moment it opened, when the captain stepped out, the fate of this flight would veer into the unimaginable. The symphony of destiny had already slipped out of tune, and the next notes would strike like thunder. The sound of shoes striking the thick carpet of first class echoed like a drumbeat. The cockpit door opened, and light from the control panel spilled out in a cold blue streak. Captain David Harris, 58, stepped into view. His hair, streaked with grey, was cut neatly. His uniform was pressed, his face weathered by 3 decades in the skies. But in his eyes was something unmistakable. The weariness of a man who had long chosen peace over justice. "What seems to be the problem here?" His voice was low, steady, carrying the weight of someone eager to smother flames before they spread. Linda Walker straightened instantly, as if this was the moment she had been waiting for. She pointed at Naomi Carter, her voice sharp and accusatory. "Captain, this passenger is in the wrong seat. She claims to be Dr. Carter, the one booked in 2A, but she is clearly being disruptive and refusing to move." The cabin froze. Every eye turned toward Naomi, some skeptical, some pitying, a few burning with anger on her behalf. Arthur Miles braced his hand on his knee, his gaze like a blade. "This is outright slander. I saw her present her ticket at the gate. This is her seat." Naomi lifted her chin, her eyes locking with the captain's. Her voice was calm, but beneath it burned a quiet fire. "Captain, I am Dr. Naomi Carter. Seat 2A is mine, confirmed. I am carrying critical medical cargo. Every minute we delay, a patient's life is at risk." Captain Harris looked at Naomi, then at Linda. In that split second, Naomi saw everything: the unspoken bias, the instinct to trust a long-time crew member over a passenger who was nothing but a stranger to him. "Doctor," he began, his voice tight but courteous. "Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding. If you cooperate, we can review and—" Naomi cut him off, her tone like steel. "There is no misunderstanding. This seat is mine, and I will not move." The words dropped like a knife into the thick carpet. Linda's brows drew together, rage rising to her throat. "Captain, she is defying crew orders. I demand we call security at once." Arthur slammed his newspaper against the seat, the sound jolting the cabin. "Captain Harris, if you let this continue, you are complicit in abuse of authority and blatant prejudice. This is not about safety. This is about discrimination." A ripple of murmurs spread through the cabin. A few passengers raised their phones, recording. The red light on the panel flickered. The first officer was summoning the captain back to the cockpit. But Harris stayed frozen, his face drawn taut. Naomi felt her heartbeat slow. She looked down at the silver case at her feet. The number still glowed, 4 degrees Celsius. But in her mind, she heard the hourglass. Each grain of sand falling was another beat of Ethan Sterling's failing heart slipping away. Fury surged through her. She had endured the suspicion, the condescension, the insult. But now, as the captain, who should have stood for justice, wavered, she knew the game had gone too far. Her hand moved into her bag. Linda lifted her chin, mocking. "What now? Calling a lawyer?" "Go ahead. A lawyer won't save you here." But Naomi did not pull out an ordinary phone. She withdrew a small black satellite device, metallic and cold. Even at a glance, Captain Harris felt the chill crawl up his spine. Naomi did not look at Linda. She fixed her gaze on the captain, her eyes blazing, her voice sharp as a scalpel. "Captain Harris, you have failed to control your crew. You have allowed prejudice to override duty. And for that reason, I am compelled to act." The cabin fell into a silence so deep it seemed to swallow air itself. Arthur held his breath. Linda sneered, but the smirk faltered when Naomi pressed a button. Naomi's voice rang out, clear and commanding, each word like the strike of a hammer. "This is Doctor. This is Naomi Carter. Authenticate code Nightingale 1. I am aboard flight GCA 714. Transport environment is no longer secure. I declare code Umbra." Arthur blinked, unsure. Linda's brows arched, her lips curling in disbelief. But Captain Harris, he froze. His entire body stiffened, his eyes wide, his lips trembling. He knew exactly what Code Umbra meant, and its weight was heavier than any order he had ever received in his life. The wind howled against the windows. The sharp breaths of passengers cut through the air. First class tilted, not from turbulence, but from the seismic shock of the truth just unleashed. Naomi snapped the device shut, slid it back into her bag. Her voice was level, but it reverberated in every chest. "This flight is over." A heartbeat passed, then another. First class was drowned in suffocating silence. Only the low hum of the air conditioning remained, casting its drone beneath the golden light that revealed the terror etched across every face. Linda Walker froze for a beat, then let out a harsh, mocking laugh. Code Umbra? Ridiculous. Who do you think you are? That you can cancel an entire flight? But her smirk shattered when the voice of the first officer came crackling through the intercom. His tone was trembling, urgent. Captain, SFO Tower just called. They've confirmed they received a Code Umbra signal from the FAA. We've been denied clearance for takeoff. The cabin erupted like gasoline meeting flame. Some passengers shot to their feet, wide-eyed with panic. Others whipped out their phones, filming, voices overlapping in frantic chatter. Captain David Harris stood rooted, his face like stone. He knew the truth. Code Umbra was no bluff, no scare tactic. It was a classified protocol, almost never invoked, reserved only for missions involving life, or death medical transport, or matters of national security. Once declared, full authority over the flight shifted immediately to the medical courier. No longer the captain, and certainly not the airline, held control. Linda stumbled back a step, her hands shaking, her face drained of color. She stammered, No, this isn't possible. A passenger can't do this." Naomi Carter sat unmoving, her dark eyes gleaming with icy resolve. No anger, no argument. Only the ruthless calm of someone who held absolute authority. "I told you," she said softly, her voice striking like a judge's gavel. "This flight is over." Captain Harris swallowed hard, then turned to the passengers. His voice cracked, heavy with defeat. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to extraordinary circumstances, we are required to return to the gate. Please remain calm." Chaos exploded. "What?" a businessman shouted. "I'll miss my meeting in New York," a woman shrieked. "This is insane. Canceling a flight because of one woman," a man roared. But among the outrage there were different eyes, too. Arthur Miles, the lawyer, fixed his gaze on Naomi with quiet reverence. He had seen countless cases of injustice in his career, but never before had he watched a woman stand so unflinchingly, turning an entire airline into a pawn. In the cockpit, the first officer scrambled, his headset pressed tight. "Confirming. Global Charter Airlines 7 from 14, per FAA directive. Aircraft must return to gate immediately. Takeoff denied. Note: medical mission integrity compromised." The warning tone beeped, a death knell for the flight. The massive jet shuddered as its landing gear pivoted, turning back toward the terminal. In first class, Linda sagged, her shoulders trembling violently. She gripped the nearest seat, whispering to herself, "No, this can't be all because I doubted her." Naomi turned her gaze on Linda. Her eyes carried neither rage nor pity, only a cold detachment, the look of a surgeon staring at a tumor just excised from the body, a toxic piece removed at last. "When you dismissed me," Naomi said slowly, each word clear for all to hear, "you weren't just dismissing a person. You gambled with the life of a boy, waiting for this heart. And that gamble, you just lost." Linda's lips parted, but no words came. Her throat locked tight. The thought thundered in her mind. 22 years of service, her reputation, her authority, all gone in less than 10 minutes. The plane rolled silently back towards the gate. Outside the window, red lights from airport security vehicles strobed, escorting the Boeing back. In the airline's operations center, alarms blared, monitors flashing with urgent red. Mission integrity compromised. FAA intervention active. Miles away, Robert Sterling, billionaire father of Ethan, stared at the live feed from the operations hub. When he heard that Naomi had been forced to declare Code Umbra, his face did not twist in fury, but grew still, his eyes blazing with a cold fire. The wrath of a powerful father betrayed. In the cabin, Naomi closed her eyes and drew a deep breath. There was no triumph in her, no satisfaction. She knew the truth. This was only the beginning. Nearly an hour had already been lost. The golden window for surgery was closing fast, and Ethan Sterling, with his fragile, failing heart, would be the one to pay for every minute of delay. The grinding sound of the landing gear against the concrete echoed heavy and final. The Boeing 707 jolted to a halt, like a giant beast shackled by invisible chains. Inside the cabin, silence fell. No more muttering, no more complaints. Only the weight of anticipation pressing into every chest. The jet bridge locked onto the fuselage with a sharp, metallic click. The door opened. It was not a flight attendant, not airline staff, but two figures in black suits who entered. They did not smile. They did not speak. Their cold eyes swept across first class. Earpieces glowed faintly blue, their movements precise, military. The taller man spoke in a voice low but resonant. "Dr. Carter?" Naomi gave a slight nod. She rose, pulling her suitcase with one hand, while the other cradled the silver case tight to her chest, as if holding a living heart. "We've been authorized by Mr. Robert Sterling," the man introduced, "to escort you to the private jet that is waiting. Please follow us immediately." Linda Walker nearly collapsed. She stammered, eyes wide, staring in disbelief. No, this can't be. She's the VIP." Naomi paused, turning her head toward Linda. Her gaze carried no fire of anger, no flicker of pity. It was the look of a doctor assessing a case beyond saving. Cold, steady, and final. Linda dropped her eyes, her entire body trembling. Arthur Miles, the lawyer in seat 3C, nodded quietly, admiration glinting in his eyes. He whispered to the passenger beside him, "We just witnessed history. A woman they dismissed with one phone call brought an entire airline to its knees." The rest of the passengers sat frozen, their eyes fixed on Naomi's every step. A few raised phones, but the suited escorts silenced them with a single cutting glance. No one dared defy it. Naomi walked tall, each step deliberate, measured. The two agents flanked her as they led her down the jet bridge. Outside, the airport floodlights cast golden streaks across damp concrete, shadows stretching as the three of them moved toward a private security gate. In the distance, a white Gulfstream G650 waited, engines already roaring, a predator ready to leap. Refueling and preparations had been completed. Robert Sterling never left his son's fate to chance. Back in first class, Linda stood paralyzed, her strength drained to nothing. Passengers whispered, their accusing eyes piercing her. A young flight attendant wiped tears discreetly from her cheek. They had seen, they had heard, they had watched Linda humiliate a passenger, and now they knew the truth. She had just destroyed her career and stained the airline's honor, in a few arrogant minutes. In the cockpit, Captain Harris sat motionless, hands trembling as he removed his cap. He knew that the moment Naomi uttered the words, Code Umbra, command had left his grasp. 30 years of a career might have vanished in an instant. At Global Charter Airlines Operations Center, alarms still screamed. Monitors flashed in red. Flight aborted. VIP medical transport compromised. Regional Director Mark O'Donnell shouted hoarsely into the phone, sweat soaking his shirt. On the other end, Robert Sterling's voice came cold, hard, devoid of mercy. Your staff insulted and obstructed the only doctor who can save my son. Get your lawyers ready. I will make the name Global Charter synonymous with injustice and incompetence. Meanwhile, Naomi climbed the steel staircase into the private jet. Wind tugged at her jacket, lifted the edges of her tightly bound curls. She glanced back once. The massive Boeing stood silent in the dark, its blinking red lights pulsing like an open wound. She did not smile, did not revel in triumph. Her look was heavy, carved deep into memory. Every wasted minute there had been a heartbeat stolen from Ethan's fragile life. Naomi clutched the silver case, stepped into the glowing cabin where the medical team waited. The door sealed shut. Engines roared louder, determined, relentless. The Gulfstream rolled forward, leaving behind the chaos, carrying with it the last hope for a 17-year-old boy lying on an operating table. Back in abandoned first class, Linda Walker collapsed into a seat, eyes hollow, soul drained. Around her, whispers cut like blades. That was the doctor who came to save a life, and you almost killed him. Linda did not answer. In her mind, one thought pounded, merciless and final. I just buried everything with my own hands. Inside the glass tower of Global Charter Airlines Operations Center, the atmosphere was suffocating, like a storm about to break. Dozens of screens flashed the same searing red line. Flight 714, aborted. VIP medical transport compromised. Alarms shrieked, piercing the air, and beads of sweat rolled down the faces of staff frozen at their stations. Mark O'Donnell, the regional deputy director, stood at the center of the room like a man who had just received a death sentence. The phone was pressed to his ear, his voice trembling. Mr. Sterling, please, you must remain calm. We are doing everything we can to fix this. On the other end, Robert Sterling's voice cut through like a blade, low and precise. There was no shouting, no profanity. But the chill in every syllable made Mark's blood turn to ice. Calm. Do you have any idea that my son is counting down the minutes? Do you know Dr. Carter was forced to trigger Code Umbra because of your staff? You let a petty flight attendant bring your entire system crashing down. Mark wiped his forehead with a shaking hand. Sir, it was just a misunderstanding. We will. Misunderstanding. Sterling's voice dropped lower, each word like the hammer of a judge striking down. Let me put this in the simplest possible terms. You have not only breached a 7-figure contract, you put my son's life in the hands of death. And I swear to you, Mark O'Donnell, I will drag this entire airline into the mud until the name Global Charter is synonymous with injustice. The room went utterly silent. The staff sat frozen, listening to the voice of a father transformed into cold fury echoing from the speakerphone. Meanwhile, on a private runway, a pristine white Gulfstream G650 rolled forward. Inside, Naomi Carter sat still, clutching the silver case tight against her chest. The soft blue glow of the temperature gauge reflected across her face. 4 degrees. Stable, safe. It was a constant reminder whispering, "How many hours left? How many heartbeats left?" She closed her eyes, but her mind refused to rest. Images churned. Linda's mocking stare, Captain Harris's hesitation, the scoffs of skeptical passengers. Each one was a stone kicked into the fragile pond of time. Every wasted minute at the gate was another piece of Ethan's hope slipping away. A young nurse from the medical team on board spoke softly. "Doctor, the system in the case is still stable, but we've already lost nearly 50 minutes. Naomi opened her eyes. They were sharp and calm, steel hidden under stillness. "That means surgery must begin the moment we land. There is no room for a single mistake." The nurse nodded, her hand tightening around her clipboard, as if to share the weight of the burden. Across the country, inside the pristine white ward at Johns Hopkins, Ethan Sterling lay motionless. His skin was pale, lips cracked, IV lines threaded into his fragile body. Beside him, Maria Sterling clutched her son's hand, tears slipping silently onto the bedsheet. Robert Sterling appeared behind the glass, his face rigid, phone still pressed to his ear. Maria looked up, eyes red and swollen. "Robert, what did they say? Will the heart still arrive in time?" Robert placed a steady hand on her shoulder. For the first time in years, he was no longer the unshakable magnate, but a father pressed to the wall. He shook his head faintly, then met Maria's eyes with a voice edged in iron. "It will arrive. Naomi Carter will bring it. At any cost." High above, the Gulfstream roared eastward. Naomi placed the case onto the small medical station table, her fingers brushing across the glowing screen. She did not whisper prayers. She did not speak reassurances. Instead, she spoke to herself, her voice low but resolute. "Ethan, hold on. I won't let anyone steal your chance at life. Not Linda Walker, not Global Charter, no one. Your doctor is on her way." Her eyes burned bright. Beneath her quiet exterior was the force that had just brought an airline to its knees. At the operations center, Mark O'Donnell slowly let the phone slip from his hand. His legs trembled, his heart thrashed. In his head, Sterling's words echoed over and over. "I will make your name the symbol of injustice." And Mark understood. When Robert Sterling said something, it was not a threat. It was a sentence already signed. Inside the towering headquarters of the Sterling Empire, a massive screen replayed clips passengers had just uploaded online. Linda Walker's shrill voice rang out in one of them. "Economy passengers are not allowed to seat themselves in first class. Return to your proper seat, or I'll call the captain." That single line, spreading across Twitter and online news feeds, turned Linda into the most reviled name in America in just a few hours. The hashtag #GlobalCharterDisgrace surged to the top. Robert Sterling sat behind a walnut desk, his hands clasped together, the glow from the screen reflecting the fire in his eyes. He turned to the group of grey-suited lawyers waiting for orders. "File suit immediately. Not just for the $50 million contract breach. I want charges for endangering a patient's life, discrimination, and federal violations. Push it as far as it will go. Make the name Global Charter a curse in the airline industry." The lead attorney nodded, but Sterling wasn't finished. He leaned forward, his voice low and cold. "At the same time, prepare a media campaign. I want Naomi Carter's image everywhere, not as a victim, but as the hero who saved my son's life despite the stupidity of this airline." In a cramped apartment on the outskirts of San Francisco, Linda Walker sat frozen in front of her laptop. On the screen, her own face stared back at her from videos shared millions of times. The comments poured in endlessly. 22 years of service destroyed in 10 minutes. This woman nearly killed a 17-year-old boy. This isn't just bad behavior. This is a crime. Linda buried her head in her hands. Inside her chest, the same scream echoed. "It was just a suspicion. I was only doing my job." But deep down, she knew the truth. She had not doubted Naomi Carter because of procedure. She doubted her because of skin color, because of a modest suit, because of all the prejudices she had never admitted. A sudden knock rattled the door. Linda jumped. When she opened it, 2 airline staff stood there, their faces expressionless, and handed her a thick envelope. Inside, an emergency suspension notice and a summons to appear before the disciplinary board, signed boldly by the CEO. Linda let the envelope drop, her hand trembling. High above, the Gulfstream G650 sliced through the night sky like a silver arrow. Inside, Naomi Carter sat still, her eyes closed, but her mind strung tight as wire. Images of the surgery raced through her thoughts. The incision, the fragile blood vessels, the heart that would fall silent and then surge back to life. A member of the medical team handed her an update. "Doctor, the heart's temperature is stable, but we've already lost nearly an hour. The safe surgical window is down to less than 10 hours. Naomi opened her eyes. Her voice was firm, unyielding. "We can still do this. The moment we land, everything must be ready. I will not allow a single second of further delay." She tightened her grip on the silver case, silently promising, "Ethan, you will live. I've already lost too much time to the blindness of others. But no one, not anyone, will take this chance from you." At Johns Hopkins Hospital, the operating theater was prepared. White lights gleamed, the air thick with antiseptic. Surgeons and nurses stood ready, every machine humming in standby mode, but tension rippled through the room. A young doctor whispered, "If another hour passes without the heart, we'll have to stop." In the patient's room, Ethan Sterling smiled faintly at his mother. His skin was pale, his lips cracked, his voice weak. "Mom, will she make it in time?" Maria Sterling gripped her son's hand, her eyes wet, but her voice steady with conviction. "She's on her way. All you need to do is trust and hold on." Behind her, Robert Sterling stood listening to every word. And in that moment, he knew. His power, his fortune, his influence, all of it meant nothing. The only hope rested on a woman, a black surgeon whom a flight crew had dared to humiliate, now carrying his son's life on her shoulders. Up in the dark sky, Naomi Carter whispered to herself, her words soft but reaching beyond, as if speaking to millions who had never heard her name. True power does not lie in what others believe you are. Power lies in knowing what you can do, and never allowing anyone to stop you. She lifted her gaze. Outside, the lights of the eastern cities were already glowing on the horizon, like a blazing line of hope. The headquarters of Global Charter Airlines in San Francisco was cloaked in gloom. Inside, on the 18th floor, the boardroom was sealed tight, curtains drawn. Pale neon lights cast a harsh glow over a long table littered with files, reports, and newspapers bearing screaming headlines. Airline blocks, doctor. From saving billionaire's son, Global Charter, prejudice costs more than a life. At the head of the table sat CEO Gerald Finney, rigid, his face heavy with strain. Beside him, a row of lawyers sat with eyes as sharp as scalpels. Across from them, Linda Walker, a flight attendant with 22 years of service, trembled. Her hands clutched the edge of her chair so hard her nails dug into the wood. "You know why you're here," Finney began, his voice low and somber. "We have the captain's report, statements from passengers, and—" he slid a tablet across the table toward Linda. "The video that has already gone viral with millions of views." The screen lit up, replaying the moment Linda blocked Naomi Carter at the cabin door, her voice cold as ice. "Economy passengers are not allowed to seat themselves in first class." The sound struck Linda like a slap from her own hand. "Members of the board," Linda stammered, her voice breaking. "I was only protecting the first-class cabin. I couldn't have known she was such an important doctor." A lawyer cut her off, his tone sharp as steel. "Your duty was not to judge who belongs where. Your duty was to follow the seating list. But you let your bias override procedure. The result is that this airline now faces a minimum fine of $50 million, not to mention irreparable damage to its reputation." Linda bowed her head, her lips trembling. She wanted to fight back, but every word caught in her throat. CEO Finney leaned back, his eyes dark as stone. "Mrs. Walker, 22 years of service cannot erase a single fatal mistake. You are suspended immediately, without pay, without severance, and you will face personal liability if the Sterlings decide to target you directly. This hearing is adjourned." Chairs scraped harshly against the wooden floor. Linda sat frozen, as if her entire world had collapsed. Meanwhile, at the headquarters of the Sterling Foundation, Robert Sterling stood before his communications team. His voice rang with steel. "I want a press release in 1 hour. The message is simple. My son nearly died because of the incompetence and prejudice of Global Charter. We are not just suing. We are going to make them taste the contempt of the world." A communications specialist raised a hand. "Do you want us to focus on portraying Dr. Carter as a hero?" Robert nodded firmly. "Exactly. She didn't just save Ethan. She is the face of justice. Let the public know that while the airline chose prejudice, she chose life." Far above, in the night sky, the Gulf Stream G650 tore through the darkness like lightning. Naomi Carter did not sleep, did not rest. She sat in the brightly lit cabin, flipping through monitoring charts, her eyes locked on the stable number glowing back at her. 4° C. A young doctor on the team spoke up nervously. "We have less than 9 hours. Even a small complication. Naomi cut him off, her voice crisp, decisive. There is no room for complications. Once we land, we head straight to the operating room. I've already mapped the graft plan. The Johns Hopkins team only needs to follow my rhythm. Every second of delay is a knife against that boy's heart. A nearby nurse whispered softly, "Doctor, aren't you afraid?" The pressure. Naomi turned, her eyes burning with steel and fire. Of course I'm afraid. I'm afraid delay will kill Ethan. But I do not fear people. I do not fear Linda. I do not fear Global Charter. I only fear a heart that might stop beating when it still has the chance to live. The cabin fell silent. All eyes turned toward Naomi, the small woman before whom an entire airline had just bowed. In Baltimore, Johns Hopkins Hospital blazed bright against the night. The operating theater was ready, cold white lights flooding the room, machines humming like an orchestra's overture. In the recovery ward, Ethan Sterling breathed in ragged gasps, his eyes half closed. Maria held her son's hand, whispering like a prayer. "Just hold on a little longer, Ethan. She's coming." Robert entered, resting a hand on his wife's shoulder, his gaze fixed on the clock. In this moment, his power lay not in wealth, but in a single, fragile belief: trust in Naomi Carter. The Gulf Stream roared as it descended, the glowing expanse of Baltimore unfolding below like a sea of stars. Naomi sat upright, her hand pressed firmly against the silver case. Her lips moved without sound, but the entire team could feel it. The race for life had officially begun. The landing gear of the Gulf Stream G6 at 50 touched down on the Baltimore runway at 6:12 a.m. The engines roared, then eased into a steady hum, their echo like a drumbeat urging haste. The cabin door opened before the jet had even fully stopped. 2 security officers in black suits were already waiting, sprinting up the stairs to clear a path for the medical team. Naomi Carter descended, her heels striking the cold steel steps with a sharp, relentless rhythm. In her hands, the silver case still glowed with the number 4 degrees, a beacon of life. Her face betrayed nothing but total concentration. She was no longer a passenger who had been humiliated. She was now the commander of a race against death. A convoy of specialized ambulances waited nearby. Doors swung open, and doctors and nurses from Johns Hopkins rushed forward with sterilized gurneys. Naomi secured the silver case into a preservation tray, locking it tight. Sirens wailed as the vehicles sped through misty, early morning streets. Red lights pulsed against glass towers, and pedestrians stopped, staring at the procession as if witnessing the escort of a priceless treasure. In the operating theater at Johns Hopkins, harsh white fluorescent lights blazed down on the table prepared for surgery. Scalpels, heart, lung machines, tubes, and surgical threads were all perfectly aligned. The surgical team, clad in green gowns and masks, eyes sharp and tense, waited in silence. The intercom blared, "Dr. Carter has arrived. Positions, everyone." The doors burst open. Naomi strode in, shrugging off her blazer, scrubbing her hands under gushing water. She donned gloves, pulled on her surgical gown. Her eyes locked forward, stripped of every ounce of excess emotion. When she finally looked up, her gaze made the entire team hold its breath. It was the presence of a battlefield commander, stepping into the heart of fire. "We begin," she said, her voice low and resolute. In the recovery ward, Maria Sterling pressed trembling hands against the glass window. Behind her, Robert Sterling stood rigid, his face tight with strain, his eyes burning with unshakable trust. He whispered, perhaps to his wife, perhaps to himself, "This is no longer about money or power. This is a battle only Naomi Carter can win." 17-year-old Ethan Sterling lay motionless under a web of IV lines. Each fragile heartbeat ticked like the hand of a countdown clock, every second striking his parents' hearts. Meanwhile, in San Francisco, Linda Walker faced her storm. Reporters swarmed outside her small apartment, microphones thrust forward. "Do you realize you nearly killed a boy? Do you want to say anything to the Sterling family?" Linda slammed the door, sliding to the floor with her back against it, clutching her head in her hands. Her phone buzzed endlessly with threats and insults. She had become the symbol of arrogance and prejudice. At Global Charter headquarters, the situation was no better. Stocks plummeted, financial news outlets calling it the worst PR disaster of the decade. In the boardroom, CEO Gerald Finney clutched the morning paper with shaking hands. "Robert Sterling has filed a federal lawsuit," a lawyer reported, "and medical associations and human rights groups are condemning us in unison." Back in Baltimore, the operating room throbbed with tension. Naomi stood at the center, scalpel in hand. Her voice rang steady as she issued orders for every move. "Clamp the aorta. Prepare heart-lung bypass. Open the chest." Machines whirred. Metal instruments clashed with sharp clicks. Blood flowed through transparent tubes as Ethan's heart was suspended in stillness. The room froze in collective breath. Naomi nodded. A nurse placed the silver case on the sterile table. Naomi opened it. A soft blue glow revealed the artificial heart, crimson and quiet, but full of promise. In Naomi's mind, the operating room fell away. She saw only Ethan, the boy who had never known what it felt like to run without gasping, who had never felt a strong, steady heartbeat. She whispered, a vow meant only for him and for herself. "Ethan, from this moment forward, you will live like anyone else." The scalpel descended. The surgery began. Outside, dawn broke. The first light spread across the hospital dome, blazing like a beacon of hope. The operating room at Johns Hopkins blazed with stark white light. Time itself seemed to stop. The steady hum of the heart lung machine replaced Ethan Sterling's silenced heartbeat. Naomi Carter's hands moved swiftly yet with precision, each delicate stitch like a silver thread binding life to science. Sweat dampened her gloves, but Naomi never faltered. Her voice was steady, firm as she gave instructions. "Prepare to connect the coronary arteries. Clamp exactly. Good. Release the clamp. Let the blood flow." For a moment, the entire room was silent. The monitor displayed a flat line. 1 second, 2. The whole team held their breath. Then, beep, a faint heartbeat. Beep, beep. Another, stronger. The green line leapt across the screen, steadying. The artificial heart, after a long and delayed journey, had begun to beat inside Ethan's chest. A wave of relief swept the room. Some nurses teared up. An assisting surgeon whispered, "My God, it's alive." Naomi did not smile. She watched closely for several minutes, adjusting blood pressure, checking circulation, and only then nodded slightly. "Stable. We're closing the chest." In that moment, she needed no praise, no applause, only the truth. The boy had been given another chance. In the hallway outside, Maria Sterling collapsed into her husband's arms when she heard the words. "The heart is beating. The surgery is a success so far." She sobbed, her body trembling with relief. Robert Sterling held her tightly, and for the first time, the man once known as ruthless in business had tears streaming down his face. "Our son will live," he whispered. Days later, newspapers were filled with images of Ethan sitting up in bed, pale, but his eyes alight with hope. The world called it the miracle heart, and across every headline, the name Dr. Naomi Carter became a symbol, not because she had been a black physician humiliated on a plane, but because she was the one who restarted the rhythm of life for a new generation. Meanwhile, global charter airlines sank into darkness. Its stock plummeted. News channels declared it the largest legal storm in commercial aviation history. The Department of Transportation and the FAA launched simultaneous investigations. In a press conference, CEO Gerald Finney bowed his head, his voice hoarse. "We take full responsibility. We pledge to reform our systems." But the apology fell flat. The public no longer believed, and Sterling's lawyers had filed a lawsuit demanding more than $200 million in damages, a sum that could bury the airline. As for Linda Walker, the woman who had blocked Seat 2A, she became a prisoner of public outrage. She lost her job, her reputation, her 22-year career. On social media, her name became synonymous with arrogance. In her small apartment, Linda sat motionless, her eyes hollow, staring into the dark. A reporter knocked on her door, asking, "Do you have anything you want to say to Dr. Carter?" Linda's lips trembled, but no words came. Deep down, she knew, an apology now was meaningless. At the Johns Hopkins Auditorium, where reporters gathered to honor the successful surgery, Naomi stood at the podium. Flashbulbs burst in waves, but her voice remained calm and clear. "I'm not here to tell the story of a flight. I'm here to talk about a boy, Ethan, who deserved a chance to live like anyone else. What almost stole that chance was not weather, not machines, but prejudice. And that prejudice has paid an unbearably high price." The hall was silent. In the front row, Robert Sterling's eyes burned with respect. Maria held her son's hand, tears streaming down her cheeks, even as she smiled. Naomi paused, her gaze sweeping the audience. Her voice cut through the silence like a scalpel. "Remember this. You never truly know who it is you are underestimating. And sometimes, that very person may be the one holding your life in their hands." Thunderous applause erupted, a wave crashing through the room. Naomi stepped away from the podium, walking through the ovation without pausing, without looking back. For in her heart, she already held the only reward that mattered: the steady, strong beat of Ethan's heart, echoing like an endless song of life. The storm has passed. Global Charter is now nothing more than a name tied to shame and loss. Linda Walker has lost everything: her career, her reputation, and even her own sense of belief. But on the other side, a new heartbeat echoes in the chest of Ethan Sterling. Strong, steady, Each beat stands as proof that arrogance and prejudice can never triumph over science, compassion, and the power of integrity. Dr. Naomi Carter has shown the world that true power does not lie in wearing expensive suits or holding privileged seats. It lies in conviction, in the belief that justice and dignity must be defended, even when the world around us tries to deny them. This story is a powerful reminder. Prejudice is never harmless. It can steal opportunities, it can take lives, and it can destroy entire systems. Yet from that same darkness, we learn that calm resolve, courage, and unshakable will can turn the tide. And now, the question is not only for the passengers on that flight, not only for the airline, but for all of us. When you witness injustice, will you stay silent or will you stand up? If you believe justice must be protected, leave a comment with just 2 words: dignity first. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and share this story so that more people can see the power of human dignity and truth, because sometimes a single heartbeat saved is the greatest reminder that we are all responsible for one another.